Thank you so much. A collection of absolute legends in the house today, and we really do appreciate them and Marlene being here. Right now, though, let's get into another side of theatre. It's time for another edition of our feature where we focus on maybe sometimes the unconventional side of law. It's called So Now What? And we are calling once again upon the legal guidance of our friend and expert in law, director at legalese.co.za, Eitan Stern, to answer the question, I want to put on a theatre production, so now what? I kind of made you sound like a superhero there, eh?
So now what? Well, I was actually sitting and thinking, wow, the previous segment, they're talking about stage productions as well. What a coincidence.
There is a reason.
And then it occurred to me it's probably a theme.
There is a method behind our madness, my friend. I love it. I've been involved in theatre productions. I've staged something that I've created before. I've been on stage. It's one of the great joys of the arts. It really is. Yes. And it's something that needs to be treasured, as we've 100%. Seen here, because people pour their heart and their soul and their very valuable intellectual property into it. So let's start with the big productions. If you're wanting to stage one of the big ones, these big stage musicals, and you'll see it in bright lights, there's something like a Chicago that comes with a certain kind of list of guidelines, and I would imagine rights that need to be paid.
100%.
Why do we need to pay rights? Why do copyrights exist in that space?
Good, let's dig into it. So with all types of property, intellectual property can be owned, and we own them so we can get recognition and we can get financial benefit. So if someone has gone and created a theatre production, say Chicago or The Lion King or something, or Les Miserables, a big one like that, then the way that they monetize it and make sure it succeeds and that it, get recognition, financial benefit, is by utilizing the copyright in that, and then anyone else who wants to do that production has to get permission and probably pay a royalty or a fee in order to use that copyright. And that's the business of show business, and they have no business like it.
And there ain't no business like it. But it does have all these wonderful little offshoots. So I'm going to talk about now little community theatre.
Yes.
A tiny little theatre that no one's going to really know about. Should they also be paying rights to stage something if they want to do their own Lion King, for instance?
Sure. Okay, it's a great question. So ethically, you might see a difference, right? A big theatre production or a small community theatre or a school, the big production can afford the royalties, whereas the school can't. And you're going to see an ethical difference. Sure, they should be able to use it. But legally, it doesn't make a difference. A crime is a crime in the law, or a wrong is a wrong in the law. And if you are using someone's copyright, whether you are a rich person or a poor person, then you need permission. Of course, some of the big productions are going to have rules around what schools or community productions are going to be allowed to do. They might make leniencies, but you're still going to need to ask for permission. And if they need a royalty to be paid, then it will need to be paid.
And I would imagine there will be allowances being made. But now, one of the coolest productions I've seen, and this is kind of a double-barreled question, was called The Complete Work of Shakespeare Abridged, where they literally did every single, this was on the West End, one of the best plays I've ever seen, and even got the audience involved, every single Shakespeare play in one play, in various different styles. What happens with an adaptation? What if I want to take a recognized work and do a parody, or do an adaptation? How do we then enter into the copyright space? Cool.
So there's a couple of things involved in that. The one thing to know about copyright is it's always going to be complex and vague. Why?
Because it's law.
Well, the law is the certainty because it's art, and art is fluid, and you're trying to get ownership over something fluid. So there's always going to be grey areas and things that are confusing, but let's dig into that. Firstly, if you are making any sort of social commentary on something, so commenting on a piece of work, then that might fall into an exception of copyright, and so you're allowed to do it. As an example, if a newspaper writes about the Expresso show, which would be an owned concept, then they don't need permission because that you can talk about it. Adaptations are also allowed if you are having a social commentary, but with an adaptation, something like Shakespeare, a copyright is going to expire after a certain amount of time. So the Shakespeare, because he lived hundreds of years ago, that copyright would now be in the public domain. So someone could potentially make an adaptation of it and then own that adaptation without owning the original.
So you're telling me there's not a great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson of Shakespeare out there that's coining it still today?
No.
Damn it, man. Come on. I wish that was the case. Thank you so much. Already a couple of light bulb moments there. We're going to be back in a moment figuring out, so now what, with lawyer Eitan Stern, especially when it comes to creating your own piece of work or staging it yourself. That is quite an epic intro for quite an epic guy. We are continuing our discussion with lawyer and director at legalese.co.za, Eitan Stern, as he breaks down the legal ins and outs of writing and staging theatre productions, and also the safety they're in, because it's quite a dynamic space, I would imagine. Lights falling, you know. Hopefully that's never the case. Let's get right back into it. Let's talk about from the other side of that coin now. I've created a piece of work. How do I go about getting that copyrighted and protecting what my child that I'm releasing into the world?
Cool. So in South African law, copyright is automatic. So you don't need to do anything. If you create something, a piece of music, write a book, draw a picture, there's a couple of other the categories of copyright. You own that automatically, so you don't need to do anything to register it. So you can take it as your own.
That being said, who's policing? Is it up to you to trawl? Is it up to your network to say, I saw your thing on, you know?
Yeah.
How do you control that space?
That's a difficult question to answer, and that's obviously a big thing because of the internet and because content moves so quickly. So it does become, if you own the rights on something, if someone uses that, it is up to you to let that person know that they can't use it or that they might owe you something for it. So it's up to you to police it.
So let's talk about the worst case scenario here. You're staging a production. A lot of our theatres are getting on some. Maybe there's a faulty lighting connection somewhere. Something falls. Someone gets injured.
Yes.
Who pays the bill?
I believe that's actually the theme, the storyline of Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So it's obviously great. So we're talking about a different area of law. We're talking about what we call dialect, which is civil wrongs, harm to one another, and essentially, very loosely put, this is a very old and complex area of law, but very loosely put, if you cause harm to someone and you did it intentionally or it's your fault, you're going to be liable. If it's not your fault, you're not going to be liable. And if you did it negligently, well, you may be liable. It depends on the circumstances.
To fight. Does a disclaimer get you out of trouble?
It can in certain instances. So if you say to someone, look, you acknowledge that you're entering a dangerous area, then it might. It might get you out of a case of negligence. But if you do something wrong or intentionally or grossly negligent, by gross negligence, so you're really negligent, you're running a theatre production and you don't make sure that your lights, you use a child's screwdriver to screw in the lighting, and someone gets hurt, then no, it doesn't matter what disclaimer you have, you're going to be liable.
I remember working on a production where a young man fell about 2 stories.
Oh my gosh.
And potentially a career-ending injury.
Yeah.
It was one of the performers.
Yes.
Is there special insurance that you take out for the performance? Because there is the potential for injuries to happen with guys on stage. It's just one of those.
So this is something that anyone should know, whether you're running a theatre production, whether you're running a storefront, an office, a sporting event, a concert, anything. If someone gets hurt, it's possible that you're going to be liable. So if a stage production, one of the actors or crew people get hurt, you might be liable. So it's really important to take out insurance, and insurance is going to cover you in the instance that there is a claim and you are liable, maybe just through negligence, so you're liable, and so that then you'll have an insurance policy in place to pay that claim. So it's really important if you have people in your space, public space, even a shop or an event, it's really important to have insurance.
Use a child's screwdriver as well to fix lights.
Yes.
If you could be in any musical, which musical would you be?
So I'm a massive musical fan, although I've seen very little. I listen to most online. I love Les Mis. If I could be in it, wow. Yeah, I love Les Mis. That's my absolute favorite.
I think you could pull it off. Eitan, a hugely interesting and enriching discussion, and hopefully that's inspired you out there to think about your theatre space. And if that isn't enough to get you inspired, well, we're going to bring you one of the most inspirational performers that has ever graced a South African stage right now in our very safe studio space.